Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet, take your profit. Find out how. PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. Yes, breaking news. Major League Baseball and its Players Association have reached an agreement on a new labor deal. Sources tell ESPN it needs to be ratified by both parties. It's expected to be a formality, and when it is, baseball is back. Jeff Passan. Apparently, they will start free agency on Thursday of next week, and they will get back into camp, and baseball will be back. Football, as I said, has free agency starting on Monday. Leave it up to baseball to say, you know what we want to do? We want to compete with football free agency. Not so smart, but I guess it is what it is. Let's talk some football. Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from InsideTheBirds.com is back for another edition here on the Sports Bash Live 97.3 ESPN. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Hey, Mike, how's it going?
I'm doing good, and I'm looking forward to this conversation as always whenever we have good draft stuff to discuss. I know that you wrote about the combine and some of the standouts that happened over there. And we know, like, sometimes you don't want to take these things to go too crazy about who did well and who didn't. But I would imagine that all of a sudden now people are starting to move up and down draft boards. So let's start with where the Eagles could be looking on that defensive line. Are there any new names that maybe emerged from the combine that they might have some more, have to take a deeper look at now?
Well, I do think that Travon Walker had a really strong workout. His teammate Devontae Wyatt, I thought, had another strong workout. They really showed their ability to play multiple positions, move well. I think Wyatt's actually more athletic than Walker is, but Walker tested a little bit better. But I think that when you watch the tape, Wyatt's a little bit more athletic. So it all depends on what the Eagles really look for. I think Wyatt's more of an interior player, but Walker is 6'5", 275, can play inside or outside, add weight to his frame, very strong at the point of attack, can anchor against the run. I thought that those two guys really helped themselves a lot in particular.
Walker, as you ran a 4.5 40-yard dash. I mean, when you're a guy of that size at that position, what could that do for his draft status? Could that, is that something that will move him up and get him out of that 15-16 range?
I don't know that it will. I think that that's certainly something that teams are going to become. Some teams will become enamored with. Obviously, he has that straight line speed, but he doesn't move particularly well laterally. That's not where you see a lot of quickness or anything like that. I think Wyatt, by comparison to his teammate, moved a little bit better, moved around better, played with a little bit more urgency, in pursuit and finding the ball carrier. But I think Walker's going to be right around that 13 to 16 range, and someone that you can plug and play as a starter right away. I think that he can play tackle or end, and I think you're going to get high-end production from him. Don't necessarily know if he's going to be a double-digit sack guy, but he's going to be a very reliable guy that you can plug in, and he's going to be a consistent starter for the foreseeable future for your franchise.
Now, another guy you wrote about is Boye Mafe from Minnesota. Now, he's a very intriguing prospect before the combine. He goes to the combine, runs a 4.5 40-yard dash, 6'4", 261. Is he a guy that has moved himself into second-round consideration when Philadelphia picks?
But not only that, Mike, you could say that he may end up being one of those guys that creeps into the back end of the first round based on his intangibles and his upside, right? I mean, we talk about teams that you're picking at the bottom of the draft, that you might see guys that look for the home run and think, hey, you know what? We might not need this guy to play right away. He might not be ready to play right away, but we might have something here. So I think certainly at the top of the second round, he goes into the conversation, but I think that you might see a team try to snag him at the end of the first and not risk losing him. And he moved up on draft boards, and I think there's going to be some teams that are a little bit higher on him now. You talk about his size, his get off, his athleticism. He's a little bit raw, and I would like to see him sort of develop a plan of attack and counter moves and things like that. But these are all things that can be taught if you get him into the right system. And I think he's going to be a really productive player. And I think that he's going to be best served going to a team that may not need him to play right away, because I think he still needs to refine some areas of his game. But I think his upside is immense.
Talk with Andrew DiCecco, Football 4 from InsideTheBirds.com, and you can check out all his coverage of the Combine. Jeff was on yesterday. He wrote a story about how, Roseman might change his evaluation or valuation of linebackers, or just the way defense has changed here, where there's some of the linebackers that that stood out to you that you would have your eye on if you were Howie Roseman.
Yeah, Troy Anderson, the linebacker from Montana State. I thought that he really showed that he can be, you look at his 40 time, he was the fastest linebacker at the Combine, and he's athletic. His skill set translates favorably to the current NFL. You need a guy that can really roam sideline to sideline and cover backs and tight ends and match up well and sort of be that guy that can do it all. You want to, you're prioritizing linebackers with, specific coverage acumen, and you're less inclined to go for that run defending linebacker that's a little bit more limited, and he's more of a limited to early down. So I think that when you look at what he's able to do, I think he's just a twitchy sideline to sideline, fluid linebacker, and I think he really, really helped this cause because he was looked at as being a sleeper. Well, he's not a sleeper anymore, and he's really became a household name based on his performance.
Yeah, I know that linebacker is a very interesting spot. I want to ask you, before we continue to look at draft prospects, Bobby Wagner, Jordan Hicks, two veterans that just hit the market. Would any of those interest you if you were John Gannon?
I'm sorry, who?
Bobby Wagner, Jordan Hicks.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Jordan Hicks probably not, but I think that Bobby Wagner you have to take a look at, of course. I think Bobby Wagner, when you look at his consistency and his production year to year, you're hard-pressed to find someone that's been, more consistent than he. But you have to figure, Mike, at this point of his career, he's probably going to want to go to a team that's a contender, and that's maybe like a team like the Kansas City Chiefs, who really could use help at linebacker, or, on defense in general. And, teams that are really close, and he might be that final piece that moves the needle. Now, that's not to say that, money talks in free agency. So I think that everybody has their price. And I think if the Eagles are really willing to commit to the linebacker position and invest in it, I think that he's going to be obviously he's going to be an instant upgrade, but I think that if they're willing to throw some money at the position, I think that he would be a player that I think he would be the player that they should target.
Now, in your mind, Andrew, Nakobe Dean, who ran well, and Devin Lloyd, who I guess ran okay. I guess people said they were disappointed. Do you think that both, neither, or one are on the board in 15, 16, 19?
I do. I do think that there could be both of them could be available right there. But here's the thing, Mike. Here's the thing. I don't think that there's a tremendous drop-off from those two players and, let's say, a Christian Harris that you could probably you never want to cement these things, but I think that he could be available when the Eagles are picking in the second round. And I think that they're the play and the upside and the overall projection is pretty comparable. And you're going to get in Christian Harris, you would get a starter and someone who is athletic and has the similar traits as those other guys. Whereas in the first round, I think the best player available to me would be a pass rusher, possibly a corner. Maybe Stingley falls down there. Maybe Andrew Booth's there because Trent McDuffie helped his cause. And obviously Sauce Gardner, I think, has cemented his status as a top 10 pick. So you might see a talented corner sort of drop a little bit. And I think those would be truly the best player available. And you could still get a high-end starter in, let's say, a Christian Harris, Brian Essimo from Oklahoma in the top end of the second round.
I know that, you look at that linebacker spot, and everybody says, they haven't drafted one in the first round for so long. And if they don't, that doesn't mean, as we kind of discussed last week, that there aren't guys that are in that second round that you can target and that they can turn it. We've seen a lot of linebackers in this current NFL were drafted in the second, third round that have turned into really good players.
Yeah, I mean, look, we talked about Fred Warner, I believe. We talked about him as someone that really proved that you can find value and then you get him into the system and you refine some of their skill sets. A lot of these players are raw in some areas, but you can still find a talented player in these third and fourth rounds, get them in the right system, refine their skill sets, and then they sort of mold into the player that you envision, if you're willing to be patient and let them develop. Now, if you're a team like the Eagles that really needs an instant impact starter, you can't afford to wait until the third or fourth round to revamp that position. I think you need to address it no later than the second round. And then if you want to add a second linebacker, which they really do need to do, maybe a Jesse Luketa from Penn State or someone to that effect, maybe in the fourth or fifth round to complement what they already have. Because let's not forget, Alex Singleton's going to be a free agent, and they don't have much outside of T.J. Edwards, and then there's Sean Bradley, and we just don't know. Davion Taylor has an injury history, so we just don't know. You don't necessarily want to count him as a bona fide third linebacker that's going to be healthy throughout the whole season, because when you really look at the position, Mike, beneath the surface, it's really, really thin, even more thin than some may even be able to appreciate. Yeah. So I think that they really need to add two linebackers.
No, that's a good point. Is you got T.J. Edwards really as your top guy coming back, and why I think he exceeded a lot of expectations. I guess he just lacks that playmaking ability. And one of the things that we see now in the defense is a lot of teams are running. We had Trey Thomas on Tuesday, and he talked about, everybody's running nickel, which means, you need more athletic linebackers. And I think that's just where TJ kind of lacks a little bit.
Exactly. And the thing with TJ is he can be a productive player for this defense, but he's very limited, right? I mean, he played last season out of necessity. Let's not forget that he was largely an afterthought last season, and it wasn't until you saw the Eric Wilsons and Alex Singleton had got off to a rough start that they were looking down their depth chart. They said, all right, let's insert him. We've seen him play and make some plays before, and, he really, ignited a fire into that linebacking core. But on most teams, he's not a starter, right? I think he's a good success story, undrafted free agent, but he's primarily a rundown linebacker. He plays with tenacity. He sets the tone. He plays with a good attitude. But I think you'd like to see him play situationally, and you're looking for athletes at linebacker, especially with today's NFL. And I don't know that he's it. I think that he can be a good three or four, contribute situationally, but they need to upgrade in a big way.
Yep, I think we're all waiting for that spot. And then you go into the secondary, which, they need a guy. Last year I remember we were talking about who's going to be the guy across from Slay. Well, in the draft they went and got McPherson. He didn't play all that much last year, what I guess would mean they still need a guy across from Slay unless they go through free agency. Now, next week we might have some answers to that. But 15, 16, 19, we see Sauce Gardner. His name has been brought up a ton, obviously. Then you got your Andrew Booth, McDuffie's. I've even seen Stingley starting to fall down a little bit in some mock drafts here. So that defensive back, the corner specifically in that range, what did you see at the Combine that kind of opened your eyes?
Yeah, I thought Trent McDuffie really helped himself. I thought Sauce Gardner, we mentioned him. I thought he just really was proved to be the top of his class in a talented cornerback class. So he's likely going to be out of range unless the Eagles really become enamored with him and they decide to trade up to acquire his services. I don't think that he's going to be in their future. But I mean, that's not to say that you're not going to get a talented player sitting there with one of their first round picks like an Andrew Booth or a Stingley, who let's not forget, it wasn't long ago that many, depicted Derek Stingley to be the top corner in this class. And he could feasibly be available when the Eagles are on the clock. So I think if you're looking at best player available, we go back to talking about linebackers. I don't know that best player available would be Nakobe Dean or Devin Lloyd. I think you're going to see one of those top two corners there. And I think McDuffie sort of leapfrogged them based on the Combine. But I think when you look at what the translatable traits and how they really figure to have, career-wise, when you really look at what they're able to bring, I think that Andrew Booth really has the makings to be a top-flight corner on the perimeter at the next level, very fluid, ball skills, you name it. And I think that he's sort of getting overlooked in this class a little bit. I think Derek Stingley also, these two guys right there are plug-and-play starters, and the Eagles really need to fortify that position. Darius Slay's getting a little long in the tooth, and they really have this cornerback two spot sort of, it's perpetually changing. And, who knows what's going to happen with Steve Nelson. You really need to, get a bona fide starter at that spot and move on, and get that position rectified.
What's your take on Stingley? He was once a guy who was, maybe top 5, and he seems to be sliding down. Do you feel the same way that he's falling?
Yeah, but he shouldn't, because he's still the same guy that everyone depicted as that top corner. He played against the best of the best in college football and held his own. He's a playmaker. He can do it all. And he's someone that, like I said, you can throw him out there on an island, and he's going to be able to defend all receivers of all shapes and sizes. So you know what? If he's going to get overlooked and fall down a little bit, because, recency bias is a real thing, and Sauce Gardner right now is the flavor of the week, and rightfully so. A great player, but I don't think that he's superior than Derek Stingley. So I think that you could see a scenario, Mike, where Derek Stingley becomes a value pick, and maybe he doesn't fall quite to the Eagles at 16, but maybe he's sort of he sort of falls close, and they decide to trade up and get him, because I still think that he's the head of the class, in my opinion, right now.
Andrew DiCecco, football at 4. Let's go look at some offensive guys at the combine, and you had the wide receiver spot. That's another area where obviously the Eagles keep getting tied to. And you see Olave ran really well. I mean, what is your take on how fast a lot of these guys were and how that is going to kind of be taken into account?
It seems like every year everybody's running a 4.2. It makes you wonder sometimes. You see that at pro days a lot too. I look at the game. I watch the film and I look at what game speed is, because that's really what matters. Sometimes that 40-yard dash speed doesn't necessarily translate onto the field. So you have to really trust your eyes and what you're seeing throughout the evaluation process. And to me, you look at Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Chris Olave is a tremendous route runner, very advanced, is going to be someone that can step right in and help a team right away, be a security blanket for a quarterback. You always know where he's going to be. He's got a sure pair of hands. Garrett Wilson probably is the wide receiver 1. And then you look at, Treylon Burks. He was, Aaron Moorhead put him through his workout yesterday. The University of Arkansas wide receiver, which I found a little bit interesting. Has some size, which is really what the Eagles need. Weighs 225. Is a true X receiver. So that's an interesting player. And then you have guys. I thought that Jahan Dotson ran a 4.4. He helped himself. Sky Moore, that Western Michigan wide receiver, he helped himself. So it's a very deep and rich wide receiver class. It all depends on what you really need and what you're looking for, but there's something there for everybody. Alec Pierce is another player that you and I talked about last week at the University of Cincinnati. Big-bodied receiver, very physical at the catch point, blocks, gets after it, and I think he offers a little bit more deep speed than some give him credit for, and he's another player that I thought probably helped himself. You can argue one of the top 10 players that really helped their stock. And he's someone that's going to be in the conversation for being one of those mid-round sleepers to keep an eye on.
Hey, on the wide receivers, real quick, we talked about fast speeds. I mean, a guy like Bo Melton from Rutgers, who's from our area. I mean, runs a 4.34. What does that do for his draft opportunities?
Yeah, see, the combine is paramount for players like Bo Melton, where they really burst onto the scene and take advantage of their opportunity, and all of a sudden they're household names, and they're at the forefront of a lot of these evaluators' minds because of how they handle themselves on the big stage, right? So I think it helps a player like Bo Melton immensely. He may have been, a late day 3 priority free agent for some teams, and now all of a sudden he's someone that you may not want to, if you see him sit around in the 6th round, you want to take a flyer and grab him and figure out what you're going to do with him, because you see the intangibles and what he offers just from a versatility standpoint. You want to get him in your system because he's a good football player, and he proved that. He proved that he has the measurables and what it takes, and you don't like to just let those guys slip by. So I think he helped himself immensely.
Yeah, and then, you wrote about Pierre Strong, but Isaiah Pacheco from Vineland also ran a 4.3 time. And I don't know that he was a guy that was maybe looked at as a draftable guy from his Rutgers stuff.
Right.
Where does that time, put him?
Well, now I have him as a 7th round guy. I had him as a 7th round priority free agent, but just given the nature of running backs in the NFL, teams aren't necessarily prioritizing them. So you can look at countless examples. James Robinson recently, he tore it up at the Shrine Bowl when I was there, and he was undrafted and then became the starter for Jacksonville and had a great, is off to a great start to his career. You can look endless, examples for that. But I would say that he's probably going to be a 7th round or an undrafted player still, even with that. But that said, if he's a priority free agent, there's going to be sometimes that's not necessarily the worst thing, Mike, because instead of getting drafted to a team where you could be the 5th or 6th running back in the depth chart in the camp body, you get your choice of teams and where you want to sign, and you look for the best available situation.
Now, Marquis Bell, I'm very intrigued by his size and his speed. Went to a HBCU. Was from Bridgeton. He went to Maryland, and then he bounced around at community college, and he ends up down at Florida A&M. He runs very well, but he's got some very unique size for that safety position.
Yeah, Marquis Bell, that's another player, and I would say Nick Cross as well from Maryland. You mentioned Maryland. He had tested extremely well, and all of a sudden now he's on a lot of teams' radars. There's a lot of those type of players, Mike, in the back end of that draft that I think the Eagles really need to add 2 safeties anyway. So that they're all of a sudden they're on they have a lot of enticing options in which to choose.
All right, there you go. There's a little combine recap from Andrew DiCecco inside the Birds. He's got plenty more. I did see something about Malik Willis moving up. I mean, did you think that his combine will move him into a area that he should not be drafted, maybe?
I do. Just you look at Carson Wentz and you look at the Russell Wilson situation, like the way the quarterback landscape is right now, Mike. You're going to see a team that becomes desperate and they reach for a player like Malik Willis, who does have some enticing intangibles. I thought he really shined in the on-field drills and he showed off his deep ball accuracy and touch. But that said, I think he may end up being overdrafted to a team that really needs a quarterback, because now all of a sudden you're looking at guys you're looking at teams that need quarterbacks. They might have to look at, Gardner Minshew or Nick Foles. Like, that's really what we're looking at right now. So I think that you might think that's fair to say that a guy like Malik Willis could be overdrafted.
All right, real quick, a couple of thoughts on the moves. Carson Wentz, a Commander. Washington desperate, or Washington knows more than everybody else?
I think that decision reeks of desperation. I'm pretty sure you would agree with that. It's so crazy to think that Carson Wentz went from a one-time league MVP candidate to now he's a journeyman. That's what he is. And I don't know how you could. I mean, it was a mixed bag last season, but I don't know how any team could think that, seeing how he was at his past 2 stops. You see all these different things that are written about him. How could you expect a guy like that to come into your system and be able to invigorate an offense? He's been very sporadic outside of that really that one season. And I think that you see a team like Washington, they saw pieces start to move, and you don't know what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson and this and that. And I think they were like, we got to get a quarterback because they need to shore up other areas on their team. I think if they knew well that the quarterback class this year isn't that strong, and they needed a starter, and they panicked, so they pulled the trigger.
You like the deal for Denver for Wilson, or do you think that they gave up too much?
I think that when you look at what Denver has offensively, they have a lot of pieces there that you could argue that they were a quarterback away from making a deep run in the playoffs. So I think that they saw what they have. You have KJ Hamler, you have Cortland Sutton, you have Jerry Jeudy, Albert O, the tight end. You have a pair of good running backs. You have a defense that is, you have a lot of pieces that you can win with there, and they just can, continue to stockpile that area. Adding a quarterback like Russell Wilson really gives them a fighting chance. When you look at all the quarterbacks that they have to go up against in the AFC, it's kind of sort of tough sledding. So now I think that sort of levels the playing field a little bit.
All right, free agency. It all starts next week. We'll be all over at Football at 4 right here on the Sports Bash. Andrew DiCecco. Check him out at InsideTheBirds.com. Andrew, have a great weekend, man.
You too, man. Talk soon.
All right, we will do that next week with Andrew DiCecco.